What I want to do in this next segment is explore the other kind of peripheral loose ends that tie in with the pattern. And I want to reiterate that I do not believe that anyone at the Human Awareness Institute, including Peter Sandhill, set out to hurt themselves, me, or anyone else. And the reason that this exploration is so important is because the pattern, the behavioral patterns in play here have hurt a lot of people, and they have caused enormous pain. And there is no way to cooperate and heal and learn from a pattern until it is talked about, until it is explored, until everyone involved understands the pattern. And so understanding every nuance of it on every level is what this video is about. I also want to say, in response to both anticipated and some already experienced backlash around confidentiality and gossip, that I have not had any time in this entire process, a single minute with the facilitators, that has not been paid time, meaning this is a professional relationship we're dealing with, in which I and everyone else involved, and in the case of the one-on-one sessions, I am the only person involved, have paid money in the trust and the belief and recommendation, first from my therapist who had heard good things about HI, secondly from all of the HI facilitators and themselves, that they are great places to spend this time and money one-on-one to produce successful relationships with oneself, with others, in a paradigm in which often the best way to have a successful relationship with another human being is to improve the relationship with ourselves. And what a really good healer does in this context is integrates. First of all, the diagnosis is really a diagnosis of imbalances and a diagnosis of those areas of the self that are dissociated, that are split off from the rest of the self. A really good healer understands that human beings born into this world, unless there's a genetic or core physical health defect, come into this world perfectly healthy and alive and able and wanting to grow, and do so when the environment is healthy. When the environment is healthy, a normal child coming into this world will find a balanced center and will develop into a healthy, loving, responsible human being. But a good healer, or psychotherapist, acupuncturist, masseuse, whatever, a good healer in the physical, mental, or emotional terrain. We have all three bodies. And in the relational arena, the understanding is that most of the issues are in the mental and emotional bodies. People aren't having breakups and affairs and violence and addiction and spousal abuse because their pinky isn't working. They're doing that in a variety of complex replaying of childhood patterns and wounds and of coping mechanisms to trauma and abuse that don't work. And so the first step, just like in a hospital, of a good therapeutic protocol, you go into the hospital, you fill out your details. Does your family have any history of cancer, of this, of that? Do you have any symptoms we're not aware of? Do you have allergies? How have you responded to this? Have you been treated for anything before? The doctor wants a holistic profile before prescribing a medication or an operation when our physical body is sick. And a good healing protocol, of course, does the same thing for the mental emotional body. Have you had suicide in your family, depression? What were your parents like? What was the relationship model? What was the relationship between your mother and father? In the understanding that the best relationship therapists and healers of any kind understand that there's an enormous influence because you've watched your mother and father have set the template of what it's like for a man and a woman to relate to. And of course, a good healer is aware of the cultural imbalances, the amount of chauvinism that's in this or that culture, the amount of emphasis on things like materialism as opposed to emotion or feelings, and the imbalances that these create. A good healer understands that what we're looking for is to create an environment and to bring consciousness to the individual so that they understand what was sick, what was out of balance in their environment growing up. And then one of the big challenges, the remedy, because it's not physical, we're not talking about the physical body to a large extent. The remedy is to create a balance, is to restore balance. So, for example, a child who has been brought up, as I was, with an incredible amount of traumatic chaos, safe, comfortable boundaries in relationship are a healthy way to balance out that imbalance. If you've had a lot of violation of, again, boundaries, physical boundaries, etc., with violence and stuff, a really healthy medicine for that is to be treated with an unusual level of respect. And this is actually very interesting because within the High workshops, that's exactly what happened. One of my favorite parts of the High workshop was the experience that in the protocol of healthy relating, the invitation, the encouragement, the training is to approach with respect and a direct request. May I touch you? May I put my hand on your shoulder? May I give you a hug? May I kind of come close and do some eye gazing? That it's actually a training in something that within our culture, there is a lot of violation of that kind of boundary. And when it's severe, it's actually a medicinal training. It's actually restoring to the individual the sense that your boundaries, that your space matters. And this is, of course, the physical space. May I do this? But the same is true emotionally. May I approach? Is this intensity comfortable? May I bring my emotional, mental attention to you? And this is a level where we're still, I think, learning as a culture. But precisely because none of this happened in social terrain, it's not like this is all happening off a clock and not being charged for. This is what's happening in a terrain of recommended experts for healthy, loving relationship. And the reason I think this is so important is that there is a lot of childhood abuse. There is a lot of young adult abuse. Abused children and young adults abuse one another as they enter romantic relationships in a variety of ways, from date rape to addiction to power play to money games. There's a lot of trauma and unhealthy aspects, and there isn't a safe place. There's no safe place within a culture where someone can receive medicine for this mental, emotional aspect of wounding and abuse and trauma. We have hospitals for those who can afford them in the United States. We have a very capitalist mindset around healthcare and well-being care. We have hospitals. But the only resource for learning and healthy growth in this very major terrain in which abuse, addiction, childhood abuse, etc., contributes to a major portion of the dysfunction that our society deals with is the therapist, the healer, the coach. This role is sacred because it's just this one little arena, and again, you have to buy into it. And one of the more disturbing aspects of there was a study in which tens of thousands of middle-class Americans took a protocol test helped out by Kaiser, and it's called the Adverse Childhood Experiences questionnaire. And what this test established, testing tens of thousands of middle-class Americans who were doing well enough to afford health care, which is an expensive price in America, is that there is a direct correlation between childhood trauma and suicide rates, the amount someone is physically and emotionally sick, the length of life, the probability of addiction and depression. In other words, that most of our major challenges as adults in this country are directly correlated to the degree, the intensity, and the amount of childhood abuse, from verbal abuse to sexual abuse to divorces to members of the family being imprisoned to physical violence, that these things correlate directly to suicide rates, to depression rates, to income level for the entire lifespan. That people who have had these experiences die sooner, spend more days in hospital, kill themselves more frequently. And what's disturbing in a culture that does not do a very good job statistically of protecting its young from these experiences is they're then left on their own in a capitalist paradigm to seek out help at their own expense to balance out. It's as if 1,000 children are born into the capitalist paradigm, which is a race. Let's see who can perform the smartest, do the it's a race. But then 100 of them, 10% are pulled back, have strings attached, are disabled, are given muscle injuries, etc., and then everyone sets off. And of course, the 10% who were disabled just by being born into a dysfunctional home perform worse in that race. And so they need to seek help, from a physical doctor, from a therapist, from, mental, emotional help. They've got to take time out of their career, out of their life, to learn how to repair the damage that was done to them. In a culture that singles out and shames every failing of the individual as a source of shame and inadequacy, and often bullies, humiliates, attacks those at the rear of the race. So you can see already the abuse survivor, it's like they're pulled 15 feet back on that 100-foot race, and then they're all set off. And of course, they come in last. Statistically, that's what this ACE, Adverse Childhood Experience study shows. Statistically, allowing for all the individual heroes and heroines that make it through, that overcome the odds and all that, statistically, the person who receives that disability comes in last. And last is in terms of earning power, status, friendship, social connection. They're the last. But then in this country, we saddle those people with the choice. If you want to get back up to speed from that, setback, you've got to pay money and scout around, because there isn't a lot of roadmap or guidance. You're not going to find in public school anything like this to get back on track. It's up to you. And you're going to have to take time out of your work and your life to do it. And you're going to have to spend your own money. And as a self-employed business owner, I was audited. And what they found fault with was the $24,000 I spent year after year to make sense of this, to get help. That's what's not tax deductible. And it's not because someone who has experienced abuse doesn't need help. Whether it's a physical injury, if someone rips your calf off and you've got to perform without a calf muscle for the rest of your life, and it's a competitive race, if you want a fighting chance in a dog-eat-dog capitalist paradigm, you have got to figure out a coping mechanism to offset that absent calf muscle, because you can't run in a normal way in that race. And so you need that. And there's not a real guidance. If you have a physical calf muscle, you go to the hospital, you get a $100,000 bill, and that's your price for being abused and having that ripped off by sociopathic people in your environment. But if you've got a mental issue, if you've been lied to such a point of view that you don't quite know what the truth is and you're more fuzzy, you're in kind of borderline sanity terrain, which brainwashing and abuse and lies can easily do. There's a lot of people in our country who are dealing with borderline sanity in some area because not a single person spoke the truth and took a stand for them in a way that would validate their own experience. Whether it's a woman being blamed for rape, etc. It's really quite scary when you look at some of these situations objectively and step outside the culture and just look at the reality. When people are hurt, they need help to heal. And when you require that people heal themselves and find their own balance, and then you do that, and then you tax them for that, not on the basis that it's not intelligent, not on the basis that the government, when I'm healthy, the government makes more money because I work more and I work better. and they take 50% of everything I earn. 50%. We're partners. And yet, in a sane partnership, you would, of course, be supported by your government to be in top line so you could make more money, so they could have a bigger amount of that 50%. The bigger the pie, the more both people get, the government and me. 50% of everything I make as a self-employed business owner goes to various government agencies. You'd think they'd want you in top shape, but no. They have a rule that says, is it ordinary and is it necessary? I say it's absolutely necessary. I mean, do you think I would waste $24,000 of my own money? Just, I think I'll go see a therapist because that's more fun than going on vacation. I think I'll go and have needles stuck into my back because that's more fun than buying a new truck or saving for retirement. I mean, give me a break. No sane individual spends tens of thousands of dollars a year on treatment if they're in perfect health and they can function perfectly well either way. The response, it's not ordinary. Contractors in your category don't normally do this. It's not ordinary and necessary. It's not ordinary. Whether or not you think it's necessary, it's not ordinary. So we're going to tax you on the full amount. And then you get into areas where, if you're depressed, it's just as disabling as if you've got, half a leg. It's more disabling. If you've got half a leg, you can get a stump, and you can do all your phone calls and go around in a wheelchair. If you're depressed, you can't get out of bed. So mental emotional disability is more disabling. And it's up to the individual, in this case me, to figure out what to do about it. And so this is part of the pattern, is a government that protects parents' rights to have children, whether or not they are mentally and emotionally capable of raising those children in a humane and healthy way, and a government that does not protect teachers' jobs or whatever if they interfere. Teachers know if they confront parents, they may get fired, they may get attacked. So there's this complicitness, particularly in the professionals that are being paid, in the case of a private school where I went to, by the parents. Those teachers did not want to know what was going on. So you have this environment, and this is why any island of sanity, of health that puts themselves forward as we're here to help you succeed in this area of mental emotional health in your relationship with yourself, in relationship with others, is a sacred place. It's rare. And the experiences I had in the workshops were exceptional. Exceptional. That's why I spent $30,000 on workshops alone. It's about $1,000 in gas, hotel, food supplies, workshop costs, and peripherals, and then the time off work, which costs another $300 or $400 as a self-employed person per workshop. So it's maybe $40,000 in cost to go to a workshop. So you want those kind of environments, and high is an important reservoir. Having traveled around the world, lived in different communities, sampled a number of workshops, I haven't found a healthier support for learning the ropes of basic relationship skills in an area that's very much needed. I see 50, 60, 70-year-old people attending high workshops and learning vital skills for the first time. When the void in education is that big, anything that helps is going to see, learning curves. So anyway, I continued in the workshops, avoiding Peter's workshop, and I just want to talk about some of the elements that I observed, and because they're small, but they're little pieces about this. So one of them is an experience in which an assistant, Hai, has a great system in which it's not just the facilitators that teach, but the team members who have gone through the workshops volunteer to help participants because they've gotten value out of the workshops. They want to participate. That's the team that Peter Sandhill invited me to be a part of. And I'm talking with the team members, and I'm quite sensitive. So I can tell when someone's upset. And the team member makes a commitment, of course, to be of service to the participant, for the person who's there taking the workshop. That's their intention, their commitment when they're on team, is to be of service. But what happens in a society in which there's all kinds of mental, emotional, physical crises going on all the time, and in any 100 people, there's going to be 3 to 5 people in absolute crisis, and you can't predict when your crisis is going to hit, and maybe you've committed to being on team a month before, and then a crisis hits, and you don't want to let the organization down, so you show up and you're in crisis. And it's a very demanding role. It's why I didn't want to make that commitment. I don't know when my crisis will hit. I don't know quite what will be needed of me and if I'll be able to be up to it. And there wasn't the support for the support team. And so I began noticing in my workshops when a team member would say, "May I be of help? How can I help you?" And they looked worse than I did. And I'd say, what's up? What's wrong? I mean, I don't, it's not human, it's not healthy to get healed by a sick doctor. Doctors need rest, doctors need support, doctors need to be clear and centered before they can do a good job. And so I don't feel safe, nor do I feel good about receiving help. And so there were a couple of instances that were happening where the team members seemed more distraught than I was. I wanted some help because I was having trouble navigating a certain area of the workshop, and I would call and the team member would come over. I'd ask for help. And in one particular case, there was a couple of times when I saw the team members just weeping, clearly needing a lot of support. And I wanted them to be getting that support. But their response is, no, I'm on team. I made a commitment to do this for the participant. It's my job to kind of work through this on my own. And that doesn't make sense to me or feel right. And so in one case, I also asked, what is the issue? And there was a woman who said to me, she said, we make a commitment on team to live not just on team, but in our whole lives, to live the high mission statement. And this is a very, very big mission statement. We are committed to creating a world in which everyone wins. I don't know about you, but I've never been in a room of 100 people where every single person felt like a complete winner, regardless of whether they're successful business owners, whether they're in great health or not. Life is a pretty complex thing of checks and balances and pros and cons to almost everything, and so it's not even really clear what that means to everyone. So it's a big thing to commit to. And I said to the team member, how. She said, I'm just not living up to it. And she's crying. I said, I wanted to help her, since she wouldn't ask for help because she was ashamed. She was ashamed to ask for help because she felt there was something wrong with her, that she'd committed to being of service, and here she couldn't be of service because of what was going on inside her mental emotional body. But I could be of service. I didn't need a lot of help at that point. I felt helping this woman was the most important thing that I could do, because you can't be committed to the entire world winning if there's a team member who's volunteering their time in your organization and they're in a state of shame and not being able to cope and feel unable to ask for help. You cannot move from that to the whole world winning. You've got to take care of your own people. So I asked her, I said, so you're feeling shame that you're not living the high mission statement in all areas of your life? She said, yeah. And I said, do you know how to live this mission statement? Do you know how to live in a way in which everyone wins? She says, no, that's the whole problem. I don't know how. I said, okay. Have you been trained? Have the high facilitators who ask you to sign up for this commitment, have they trained you? Have they told you how to do it? And she said, no. I said, so they've asked you to do something you don't know how to do, one, that just looking on the face of it seems like, I don't know how to do it. I've achieved thousands of personal goals, but I don't know how to create a world in which everyone wins. And you've received no training. I said, that sounds like shame. To ask someone to do something they can't do without any training and support to do it, and then leave you feeling like there's something wrong with you if you ask for help. That doesn't sound healthy. I said, there's nothing wrong with you. There's something wrong with them. This isn't right. You've been set up to fail. You haven't been set up to win. They're not committing to help you win, but they're asking you to commit to helping everyone win. That's not right. And I remembered something I'd read in my teens about shame. And what it was that there's two kinds of shame. There's superhuman shame, which is when the parent can do no wrong, automatically the fault of the recipient. That's superhuman shame. And it's done in a couple of ways. One, the superhuman parent, the superhuman shamer, tries to be perfect and does a pretty good job. Like, they're more organized, the house is cleaner, they have the nicer, they don't have any spots on their car, they're doing the stuff that looks cool, that looks good. So they're doing that above most. And I looked at the high facilitators, and they have amazingly hard jobs. Organizing these workshops. They say they want to meet every single person in the workshop. This is, 40 to 60 people in a weekend. They want to meet you personally in these tiny breaks. They want to, get up at 7. They get up at 7 in the morning. They don't go to bed until 2 a.m. These are long workshops. They're constantly on. They're doing way more intense stuff than, any workshop that I've seen. I've taken survival workshops, in nature in Scotland and canoes, and they haven't been half as intense, where you're spending the night in the island and, learning how to survive and all that. Nothing like this intensity. And as a result of their excellent performance in these arenas, people look up to them. I look up to them. The team looks up to them. There's an aspiration that these people are the role models of true service, of true healthy relationships. We want to be more like them. And that's one of the things that fuels the personal work that's done with high facilitators. It fuels wanting to be on team and learn and be around and all that stuff. It's a superhuman job. I could not do it. My body couldn't do it. It goes back to the, liabilities and stuff from lots of childhood trauma. My body couldn't do it. My heart and mind can't, meet 50 people in a workshop and really be there for them. And, I certainly couldn't, live this mission statement, because I'm not even sure if it's a healthy mission statement to be committed to a world in which everyone wins, when there's such a huge gap. I mean, FedEx has a mission statement when it absolutely has to get there overnight. And they do a pretty good job, 99.9% success rate. But high, in response to its mission statement, you'd say is 99.9% failing, meaning all the world problems in which people do not feel like winners seem to be at odds with High's commitment to a world. It's like, it's not, is it a very tiny commitment? Is it an ineffective practice? There's not a big correlation between their commitment to that mission statement and a world in which everyone is winning, in the way that, when it absolutely positively has to get there overnight. That's a great mission statement. And there's lots of documentation on the absurd effects of these flowery corporate mission statements that don't mean anything to anyone. And then, there's some mission statements like FedEx's that really work, and they help organize the whole company around something that really works. So what I decided to do was, I'd already experienced Peter's sense, and I had, I think, an intuitive sense of the superhuman shame dynamic, because Peter had not trained or followed a healthy protocol and had hurt me and left me in a reactive, confused state, taken my money, and then I thought it was my fault. That's superhuman shame right there. Peter could do no wrong, no refund, no apology, no caveat that I don't have any training, I'm not licensed, I can only do this and not that. It's this magnanimous superhuman shame role. I didn't see that at the time, but I saw it with this woman. And I saw it in the way the workshops were run. And I don't want to see the team hurting, not able to help, feeling bad when they're doing such a great job at living a human mission statement, to show up the best you can and to ask for help when you need it. They're doing a great job at that. And that seems more healthy. So I wrote a letter to the facilitators. It was about 9 pages long. And I talked about this dynamic from a couple of angles. I said, number one, since I can't do your job, and most people can't do your job, it seems like you're creating a sustainability crisis for High, because you're all going to grow old and die, and who's going to replace you, and what percentage of the population could replace you to do the role you're playing? So this is not motivating. It doesn't give the space for the organization to grow and stay healthy, number one. Number two, it seems like there's superhuman shame dynamic within your relationship with the team, because otherwise I wouldn't be meeting people who are doing an amazing job and volunteering, who are in tears, and who don't feel worthy of asking you for help because you're doing so much more than they're doing, and they can see it. They can see you're not crying in front of the room because you can't go through another 14-hour day, meeting 30 people, hosting every this, doing this, and that. You're not doing that, so they should be able to do it. And that's the superhuman shame message. You should be able. It's the perfect mom and dad and stuff who criticizes and in a roundabout way gives the message, you're so much less than me. And so that's one kind of shame. The subhuman form of shame we all know about. That's when, someone is so ugly and subhuman and disgusting and drunk and addictive and dirty and does everything, against the culture, every taboo of the culture. They're addicted, they don't talk nice, and they, rape some little girl. That's subhuman shame. And the little girl says, I feel so dirty that I was, raped by that man, and the culture somehow allows it. Yeah, you should have run faster. You should have, and shames the girl for not, that's subhuman shame. Superhuman shame is, of course, very much harder to spot because someone is playing a role that is where the shame is more covert. They may even be as Peter was, very magnanimous in terms of, I understand why you might have these, compulsive reactions because you're a mere human being, but I'm so big I just love you anyway. I mean, how do you see that that's abuse within normal cultural lenses? It's more like, gee, I wish I could be like him. And so it takes some weeding through to see who is starting to feel inadequate and feel shame, who feels unworthy and why. How is that getting born? And it's born with these superhuman acts and with these subhuman acts, both. The normal human being who's just a human being who says, I make plenty of mistakes, I'm not trained perfectly, this is a whole new field. I mean, relationship technology is in its infancy, mental emotional health is in its infancy. This is not a terribly healthy culture. We just do our best here, and if we can help, and we don't have this training and we don't have that, and we do our best, and if it helps, great, and if not, here's a refund, or let's get you some help with someone who can help you. I mean, that's just the neutral human being. That's when you feel on the same level, not above, not below. So this was an incident, and there was, and so this tied in. And what was interesting with this 9-page letter, because I analyzed it from the point of view of Hay's growth and succession, of the superhuman shame dynamic, of the abuse that was happening on team that I was seeing, and of possible remedies. And the remedies that I suggested was give the team assistance. Have some people at every workshop where if a team member is in crisis, someone is there to help that team member, and they do not feel that they're letting everyone down because stuff has gone on in their life that they have no control over. Give the team help. And the other thing I said is make the facilitator body less superhuman. Change that dynamic. Now, these superhuman facilitators did not acknowledge receipt of the letter for a month. I called Peter Sando, what's going on? Have you got my letter? Da, da, da. He said, yeah, we'll kind of get to it in the next meeting. And I said, well, so what's happened there? And he said, well, we're busy, we might get to it in another meeting. I said, well, I want to, when this seems important. And finally, after like 6 months, I just had to settle for, they discussed it. No thanks, no that's true, that isn't true. So that seemed to be consistent with the superhuman thing. You're just a mere participant, you're just a mere observer. We meet behind closed doors. In our ultimate and infinite wisdom, we've discussed it, that should be enough for you. The fact that you're meeting crying team members, the fact that this and that seems to be happening, the fact that our organization may not be able to grow and you care about it, not really your concern, and it's not really stuff we have the interest to spend much time in. And so I felt unimportant, which is how superhuman shame gets passed on. I'm a mere person who isn't worth thanking, acknowledging, or having anything responded to. So this is superhuman shame. But at that point, it's like, well, I've done what I can do. There's no one else to write to. I care about this, I've shared it, nothing's happening. That's their decision. I started working with Ann Watts and worked quite healthily with her. I would say that 2/3 of what we did was either helpful or neutral, which is a good return, particularly in the state of our culture. So I worked with Ann Watts, and she mediated several of my relationships, which I thought it's just good to get a third party who knows and has perspective to be involved as a support person. There's this phrase, it takes a community to grow a child, and I think it takes a community to support any meaningful new thing coming into being. And since we don't have that community available to a large extent in modern culture, a supportive therapist, Ann Watts, seemed like the next best thing. So I would tell my partners, let's go and meet Ann, just so she knows us. And then if you see anything that I'm doing that you don't think I understand, or if I see anything that you're doing that you're in denial about, let's have an agreement. We'll bring in Ann and have a kind mediation and insight. Let's give ourselves that gift, that added element of safety. And so Ann was that in a number of ways for 5 of my relationships to varying degrees. So that worked very well. And Ann has a husband who she thinks has Asperger's syndrome. And looking at some of my traits, because this is the unspoken part, there was no questionnaire when I took my first high workshop. There was no questionnaire when I did my first session with Peter and Sarah Sandhill. There was no questionnaire when I did my first work with Peter Sandhill. There was no questionnaire when I did my first work with Ann Watts. What that means is that any prognosis, recommendation, or work is happening without the benefit of a full picture. None of us walk into a room today just as if we were newly born. We are all dealing with a variety of blind spots, imbalances, coping mechanisms, traumas, pains, beliefs that may or may not be at odds with parts of reality, that may or may not be at odds with parts of ourselves. There's parts, of ourselves that, deep buried emotions that our mind isn't. There's a lot out there to explore, and we don't even know all of it. But a questionnaire, a good questionnaire, can get to the heart of most of it. A questionnaire such as the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study is just 10 questions. And yet you can tell from those 10 questions, is this a high-risk suicide case? Is this a high shame case? Is this someone who is probably spending a majority of their energy coping rather than living? Or is this someone who's, relatively unscathed and healthy, and we can just deal with it face value? You can tell that in 10 questions, but you can't tell anything if you don't ask them. And that's the importance of a questionnaire and a protocol that begins with a thorough examination of the mental emotional body that is comparable to the questionnaire of our physical bodies. So that didn't happen. And so there was a lot of stuff going on. I did a lot of my dating within the high community, precisely because it was such a relief to find people interested in healthy, conscious communication relative to, the larger world out there. That, if you meet someone at high, they've just spent $1,000 to be there learning about healthy, conscious relationships. That's pretty high commitment level. And as a result, I met some pretty neat people who were interested in growth. But we were navigating around some terrain that neither I nor they knew fully how to navigate, and which I, as an organization, committed to me winning in relationship and committed to my high partners winning in relationship, had not prepared either of us to navigate with. These were anomalous bits of information that did not seem to have a pattern, where there did not seem to be anyone or any place to talk about these things to understand what to do. So, like one of them, I have to be absolutely still when I go to sleep, and I cannot have anyone touch me until I wake up, and I need to sleep as long as I need to sleep, and then I need to wake, and I need to be the first one to talk. Meaning I can't start talking without going through a certain level and gradually leaving sleep. Now, I've coped with this by living alone. I left home at 17. I dissociated from my family at 14. You live alone. This is not even in your mindset. I just do what needs to be done to cope. But you start to have a relationship, and I just say, that's what I need. Don't touch me until this, don't talk to me until I talk to you, I need this. And if you can't do that, you need to be in another room. Well, that's great that I know what I need and it works. It's a coping strategy. But I don't know why. My partner has no idea why. And so it leaves both of us feeling unsafe. And that's just one of a number of things that I knew were very important, like the whole day would be shot, or I couldn't be in a relationship if someone couldn't respect that. It was that big of a deal, but I don't know why. And I don't know why it's only me. Like my partner isn't saying the same thing. And there's no questionnaire to share this bit of data. The therapist, the coach, the this, the that, the workshop, they're teaching you how to succeed in relationship, but they're not starting with an analysis of the data. And they're not empowering me with what this might mean. And of course, looking back, I can see these are all symptoms of PTSD from early childhood trauma, which I didn't know was trauma, because when you grow up in isolation and your parents ignore and don't apologize and don't own anything, and you don't have media, we had no TV or radio or anything, you just think that's... Of course I was terrified, of course this, but my parents called that love. Peter called this love. You think it's normal. So you don't know that this is a cause for concern, and then you don't correlate these seemingly isolated things, or you can't touch these things. Of course, I understand why now, but there was no one asking those questions, and this was causing friction in my relationships. Some people would say that's not normal. So then I would feel bad. And I'd say, well, I guess you're right. I mean, you're not asking for that. I am. I know I need it. Well, that's not normal. Okay. Well, it's just too difficult relating to you. So then it goes back to the shame. There's something wrong with me. There's not something wrong with my parents. There's not something wrong with therapists who are not doing a thorough diagnosis. There's not something wrong with workshops that aren't having a questionnaire or teaching anything about this. I should be able to take what I'm learning in these workshops and in these therapy sessions, and I should be a winner. People are telling me that I'm smart. I do well in business. I achieve my goals. So people are telling me, you're a winner. And yet, I don't even know why I need to do a variety of things. I don't know why I'm different. And I feel shame. This is, again, how a culture shames the person who's demonstrating symptoms of cultural blind spots, of cultural ignorance, of cultural neglect. Because a child does not get born in a culture that truly cares about its infants before a parent takes a psychological profile to see, are they capable? What abuse are they dealing with? And so when you have multiple generations of abuse happening and legally sustained by a culture, that is a culture that is not looking after its own. My parents had no more chance of escaping their abuse than I had of escaping mine. There's a complete blind spot and disconnect, and no one's even diagnosing the pattern. That's why the pattern is so important. These aren't bad people. These are ignorant people. These are blind people. These are self-centered people, as everyone in trauma is. These are under-resourced people, as many people in America are, around emotional, mental issues. So this is the kind of part of the issue, is kind of going through and seeing these anomalies, being re-traumatized a number of times by women who would not hear that I had limitations in certain areas. I'm sorry, I can't do that. Like, I remember one woman who I explained, I've got to sleep on my own. She just didn't hear it, didn't understand it. And when I couldn't get up, when she got up very early the next morning and we'd just made love for the first time, she started abusing me in the bed, shouting at me, telling me what a shit I was, telling me that I was just like all the other men, just wanted to use her sexually. And I'm in there in this deep comatose place that I go. And I'm saying, this is a nightmare. I told this woman, I'd love to be able to do all these things. I can't. And no one is there. No one even knows that this is happening. I have no one to tell. But I go away traumatized, and a woman goes away feeling used, feeling unloved, feeling lied to, and hating me. Right after taking a workshop on love, intimacy, and sexuality. And this workshop is not preparing me or her for what's going on. And this is the pattern of blindness. My parents did not know they had PTSD. Their parents did not know they had PTSD. I did not know that I had PTSD. And the concerning thing is that after spending $250,000 on therapy, energy work, acupuncture, massage, healing crystals, workshops on relationships, workshops on spirituality, doing more than 1,000 hours of meditation, I did not know that I had PTSD. I did not have a language for communicating it. And not a single one of 30, some licensed, some unlicensed, practitioners in all these mental, emotional well-being arenas, not a single one asked the questions or put two and two together saying, Dane, you can't look at my eyes. What's going on there? Well, I just can't. Sometimes I can't do that. Are there other things that happen? Well, I can't sleep touching. No one asked that line of questions. They just respected and accepted, which is of course better than shame, criticism, and abuse, what was happening. Which gave me the message with, I'm being shamed and I'm having all this relationship problem. There's all these areas that I know people don't understand me and I don't have a language to talk about it. And it really hurts to be shamed and rejected in those areas. It feels tremendously disempowering I feel completely helpless. I feel so sad about the impact, like that woman who goes away feeling that I used her, when I fell in love with that woman that night. When I had a transcendent sexual experience for one of the first times in my life. Leaving my body during sex, it was so profound that I needed extra sleep. And I felt she was there with me. And she walked away hating me, believing, because she had no story in her mind that would explain what she had observed, except that I was using her for sex, as had happened for her numerous times, to a traumatic degree. And there was no questionnaire for her joining the workshop. There was no exchange of information facilitated by a workshop on intimacy, IntimeUC, but we didn't see. And we didn't see after 30 workshops. And we wouldn't have seen after 100 workshops, because that vital bit of IntimeUC was not part of the protocol. And this is the danger of a mission statement when you say you're committed to creating a world in which everyone is winning, and I'm not winning amongst a group of 60 people who have recited the same mission statement. The message can so easily go back to the early affirming childhood message. There's something wrong with you, which is the opposite of winning. Shame is a traumatic event. We feel unworthy, unwelcome, unlovable. This is the crisis. This is the crisis of this blind spot being this big, that even the person showing symptoms, even the person living with PTSD, doesn't know who to talk to and in what way and in what language. Because, do you rush off to your therapist and say, I can't touch my partner at night for at least 8 hours, and then I have to be the first one to talk? How do you know that that's relevant? Or that's not just, she doesn't do that, but maybe plenty of other people do. You assume that the expert knows what to ask and how to run the session, so that you, the person who's having trouble, spend your money well and come out informed and empowered about what to do about it. And this wasn't happening. And as this went on again and again, and as most of my relationships fractured in areas, and as I realized that I didn't know how to respond and that I was not getting help from any of these therapists, what happened was rage, anger, frustration. It's like, I don't want to do another love, intimacy, and sexuality workshop that just sets me up for being shamed and traumatized. Feeling like an idiot. I don't even know how to talk about this. I don't want to do that. I hate these therapists. I feel like such a fool. I've paid you $250,000. I'm no better off. I'm having the same problems I've had my entire life. And you just sit and listen and say, we care about you, take my money, and do nothing. Well, so what's happening is another level of the superhuman shame dynamic. So obviously, I know these therapists, training various things, doing their best, and very compassionate, kind woman. She is doing her best. What's happening is it's not what I need. I'm coming away weakened from taking time off work and life, and I'm reciting some of these deep aggravations, but they're not going away because the root cause is not understood and there's no language to talk about it. There's no questionnaire, there's no basis for diagnosing. Like, I have a dream that every human being who walks into any healer's office enters into an app, a complete digital profile of everything that seems anomalous, mentally, emotionally, physically, every symptom, every source of dis-ease, mentally, emotionally, physically. And the app shows them a probability field. There's a 30% chance you have PTSD, there's a 80% chance you have Asperger's, there's a 90% chance you're depressed, there's a 20% chance you feel suicidal, there's an X% chance you need more vitamins, there's an X% chance that you need better communication skills. This is the diagnosis of this based on the symptoms you're sharing, and these are some of the things you can do about it. And then you rate and you look at what things work. Okay, this you assume that it was Asperger's or whatever. You did this. It didn't improve. Therefore, it must be something else. And this is the next most likely probability. And where the therapist looks at all that data and takes it all in and determines from that whether or not he or she is capable of operating in that terrain, whether they're effective in training and protocol, takes feedback. Is this helping or not? Like, I have one gentleman, I've paid him $100,000 to just do and do and do and do, and this hasn't improved. Why do I still go to him? Because despite how irritable and frustrated I get, he listens with the least amount of defense. He's kind, he's empathetic, and that's better than being completely alone in this dynamic where people are shaming you, criticizing you, and not even listening with kindness. I mean, listening with kindness is a step in the right direction. A clear diagnosis and protocol for responding effectively and following up with feedback. Is it working? A doctor doesn't just inject you with penicillin, your symptoms get worse, and they keep injecting you with penicillin, your symptoms get worse until you fire the doctor. No. The doctor has a hypothesis, does their best to test, does what is considered the most effective treatment, see if it works. They try the backup treatment, and then they change the diagnosis if that's not working. That's what a doctor does. That's what a healer that is effective does. So I worked with Anne, and I got more and more frustrated within the workshops because the patterns were repeating themselves. They weren't getting better. And so it got to the point where basically I said, at High, I meet people who are interested in healthy, conscious relationships. That's all I can basically learn. And sometimes I'm very helpful to people. I've had people tell me that talking to me in a workshop, and so while I don't have the stamina to be on team, I've had increased chronic fatigue over the last 15 years that's taken 80% of my energy, 80%. And of course, that's not diagnosed, and talking to Kaiser, hopeless. So I've gone to be of service. In some situations, it's like I'm not getting what I need. I don't get understanding. My learning curve within this organization has stopped. But I can be of service. People tell me they had a great experience, or I go and talk with the team member who's having trouble, or I pick the sensitive that seems to be going through some trauma during the workshop and volunteer some support in a way a team member can't do. So some of that helps, and then I get to feel like I can contribute something. I think we all want to feel that way. And it's harder when you've got limitations. And it's very hard when the situation is such that you've got incredible strength in one arena, but a huge disability in another arena, And we like to look at people's simplicity, simplistically. People like to either put me up on a pedestal and say, you're amazing, da-da-da-da-da, or you're weird and disgusting and da-da-da-da-da. And very few people want to take the time to break those two apart. To say, I can't sleep with you because I like to cuddle with my mate, but you're the most interesting person I can talk to. I can't have sex with you because I'm not attracted to you, but I've learned more from you than I've learned with my therapist. I would love to have sex with you, but I'm not interested in all this talking stuff that you're doing. And let's find the overlap where we both win and receive value and see the complexity of an individual in their strengths, in their limitations, their weaknesses, and their gifts. And that takes time. And high is an environment where I've met and had rich relationships with most of my Western lovers within the high umbrella of support groups, community nights, etc., etc. And without knowing that I had PTSD or having a label for it through any of this, I nevertheless found nourishment in the language, in the community, and in the calming that comes. When you have complex PTSD, you get revved up. It's very hard to come down. And nurturing, very slow touch and cuddling does that. And high was the only place in a touch-phobic culture where men don't kiss each other on the cheek or walk arm in arm like they do in some countries, where homophobia is rampant, and where women are, they won't kiss or hold hands unless they want to go to bed because they're so upset with all the men that took a holding hands as a come on, and then get angry at them because they won't go to bed. And so there's this whole, and this is all the absence of education, and so it means it's very hard to just hold something and calm down. But that's exactly what someone with PTSD sometimes needs. I needed it a lot, and so I found that. So that kind of takes us to, through the end of my 10-year relationship with the community. There's a few other peripheral friction points and misunderstandings, but those are the broad strokes. So let's just honor an organization throughout this that in the workshops, to the best of their ability, helped me more than any other community helped me. And in the areas they hurt me, mostly by omission and ignorance, except for the active role of Peter in suggesting things that were completely inappropriate for my well-being. Let's just honor an organization and all the team and all the participants that created a safer place for me than has existed anywhere else in all my travels in the world that I have known.